Welcome back to On Education, and welcome to the bests. Every week, Mike and I take you through a list of our top things, from books to games, from people to ideas.
This week, a topic near and dear to our hearts. We're going to share out some of our favorite education podcasts. There's something for everyone here, so let's get into it.
So I right at the top.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not including ourselves because that would be just weird.
No.
Be like, right at the top is a podcast that I think every educator in whatever field you are, from a paraprofessionals to, or let's say even a student teacher, paraprofessionals, educators of any kind, doesn't matter the content area, administrators, and everybody in between should be listening to this podcast. It is The Cult of Pedagogy by Jennifer Gonzalez. And there is so much goodness, so much to get from this, so much basically professional development to be able to garner from this podcast and from her blog posts also, that it should just be required reading. There's so many things that we reference as instructional coaches. We're like, oh, here's the article about this, and it's her article. And some of the things still relevant today were written, or the podcast came out years ago, and they're still relevant and accurate for today's thing. So, Cult of Pedagogy by Jennifer Gonzalez. I wanted to make sure we put it right at the top.
One of the OGs of podcasting with our friend Jeff Bradbury. Number 2, Teachers on Fire. Tim Cavey, our friend, fellow Canadian Tim Cavey. Really love his interview style. Love that he talks to a lot of the same folks that we talk to. So hearing his approach to talking to some of the same people has been really kind of interesting. And what I appreciate the most about Tim is something that we take super seriously here, which is production quality, really honing the craft of podcasting, taking it seriously. And Tim does that. So he takes the podcast very seriously. It is his thing, just like this is kind of our thing. It's certainly my thing. So, he takes it seriously. We really appreciate Tim and his work on Teachers on Fire.
And he's super obsessed, as he told us, with editing and making sure that everything is super tight. And you can tell when you listen to this podcast, it is very tight. It's awesome to listen to. You could tell the production, like you just said, quality is amazing. The next one, I actually talked about it, I think maybe the last episode, so we're giving her some more love, is Noah Daniel's Personal Playlist Podcast. Highly recommend it. We've both have had the privilege of actually being on it, and it is so unique, such a unique take, and it brings out such great conversations because it talks about the connection between music, education, everything else in between, and kind of the things that it brings out, and the conversations that you end up having with Noah are phenomenal. So highly recommend it. The Personal Playlist Podcast.
She's super personal, super reflective.
Yes.
It makes you think about you as a person, not necessarily even you as an educator. Which was great. Like almost all the stuff that I talked about was very personal. And listening, it's one of the only other podcasts. It's the only podcast that I listened to in advance of me being on to prep, for the explicit purpose of prepping to be on it. I listened to, I can explicitly remember listening to Jennifer Williams, her episode, because I wanted to get a sense, and actually it made it worse. I was more nervous. So
more pressure.
But Noah, you're great. You're a wonderful person to talk to. It was a lot of fun. We are both big fans of Mr. Mike Matera, and his podcast is Well Played. It's also on YouTube, and it's actually, I think, more listened to on or watched as a YouTube channel than it is as a podcast. If I'm not mistaken, maybe Mike can chime in and let us know. But I've been on it. I've been lucky to have been on it twice. Talked about Fortnite a little bit, a couple times. So and he's right in our wheelhouse. Like we're talking about games, we're talking about play, we're talking about being, joyful experiences and learning with other, having kids learn with other kids, in creating fun, gamified or game-based or play-based learning experiences for kids, and that's where we eat. So Mike Matera, well played, awesome podcast there.
The next one that I wanted to make sure we talked about comes from someone that I basically idolized. So when she was going to come on our show, I was so damn nervous.
You were actually geeked up about it. I remember now.
I actually told her that too in real life, just this last time we saw her. I think I made her really uncomfortable. So
but
sorry.
It's funny because now we work together with her quite a bit.
So sorry, Monica Burns. So Monica Burns has a podcast called ClassTechTips, and it's coming up on its 1-year anniversary, I believe. And it's really well done. If you only have a short period of time, she packs in a lot into these 10-minute or so podcasts, and it basically follows along. If you love her blogs, if you love her resources that she gives, it gives those types of things, except in this kind of audio format. You can listen to it in the car on a 10-minute ride or whatever might be on a run. They are fantastic. They're well done, edited. So Monica Burns, big fan. Maybe creepily, sorry. ClassTechTips. Yes.
Quite possibly, and I'm going to make Brad blush a little bit right now, but
I'm going to agree with you.
Maybe the best interviewer in educational podcasting is Brad Schreffler. This is the Planning Period podcast. We've both been on it.
Yes.
He's a great person to talk to. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. People talk to so what we hear all the time is how relaxed we are, like, as people to talk to. Like, they always say, I don't feel stressed when we're interviewing with you. It's a chilled environment. It's easy. You're easy to talk to, and that's awesome. I find Brad easy to talk to, but in a different way, in the sense that it's still like really high level. It was deep discussion with Brad, and he's just great at bringing out. He questions. His questioning style is fantastic. Big fan of Brad Schreffler in the Planning Period podcast.
I wanted to say about Brad too. He could have been like a therapist, in a different life.
Sure.
Because my goodness, the stuff that I said actually on his thing, and I went back and listened, I'm like, where did this come from? And I told him, I'm like, you brought some things out of me that I didn't even know I had in me. And actually, it inspired me. One of the keynotes that I gave was because of something that he brought out in me that I didn't even know I had inside of me. I said a couple of things, and he was like, oh, that's powerful. And he rephrased it, basically put it in there. He is freaking awesome. Brad Schreffler, Planning Period podcast, yes.
The leader of Learning podcast, Dan Kreines. Dan is another one of those podcasters that takes the craft of podcasting seriously, and that is another thing that I the consistent nature of all of these podcasts, I think, is also one of like quality, because for whatever it's worth, there are a lot of podcasts that are just kind of thrown together, and that's entirely possible. And I think it's still valuable to get your voice out there, and everyone should try. But then there are people that just want to take it and put it at another level. And Dan's podcast, Leader of Learning, is definitely at another level as well. So
last but not least, I wanted to give a shout out to friend of the podcast, Scott Nunes, and his TNT EdTech podcast. The thing that differentiates their podcast, and I've actually gone on it, and my episode hasn't come out, but it's just even being interviewed by them and listening to some of their episodes is just a different enthusiasm that they bring to podcasting itself, and enthusiasm for education and the things that are happening as far as in the edtech space. And that enthusiasm is contagious, and it's a fantastic podcast. The TNT EdTech podcast with Scott Nunes is freaking awesome.
Great logo.
Yes.
I'm a fan of the TNT EdTech podcast logo. As a logo snob, I'm a fan. Boys, good job.
Yeah. So that wraps up our educational podcast list, and you can always come back to this segment of the best by checking out our blog at oneducationpodcast.com or watching it on YouTube. Just search for On Education and check out the playlist. Want to support On Education? Check out our Patreon site at patreon.com/oneducationpod.